And we're live.
First time on your stream here, iphi. So thank you for having me.
Hey, it's first time for everything. By the way, am I too loud, too quiet, just right?
You sound perfect to me.
Okay. Do you like the new mic, by the way?
Uh, it sounds good, man. Better than my iPhone does. I'll tell you that right now.
You,
I have no audio set up but an iPhone.
yeah, yeah. Before I had the gamer headset, which a lot of people didn't really like because it was like too quiet, but it turns out my voice is wrecked anyway. So even with a good mic, my voice still doesn't improve much. But we'll make do. Okay, so we got 45 minutes to solve all of humans' problems concerning religion. Are you ready?
I am, and I would like to firstly address your concern about the agnosticism being vague and not giving you anything to sink your teeth into. So I would like to
Okay,
provide you. I would like to
let's start there.
provide you with some solid points which you can agree or disagree with. That way it makes the discussion more interesting if you'd like that.
Groovy. Let's do it.
Okay, so here's my individual belief on God in terms of agnosticism and deism. Try and be as focused as I can. The main question seems to me to be around intelligent design, around a consciousness. My answer to that is yes. I
Mm-hmm.
believe there is. It seems to me as I look out at the world around me that I see something that we can all recognize. And I believe that when God created us in his image, what he was speaking about was our ability to think coherently, coherent thought. Seems to me as if I observe in the reality around us, the way it functions as a whole, that it seems to resemble to me coherent thought in its entirety, moving and flowing together. And it's on the edge of my intellectual description to describe, which makes sense because it seems to me anything as fabulous or magnificent as God would be so. I think when we're told in the Bible that we can't touch God, it's a very literal statement because we are incapable of conceiving objective truth. And I believe when Jesus said, I am the way, the light, and the truth, that is also a literal statement. Although some things in the Bible I believe are not literal. I believe there are metaphorical transmissions of knowledge that in and of themselves are true, but are transmitted to us in a way that our minds can comprehend. Is that specific enough for you, Mr. iphi?
Yeah, that's a healthy start. So what you're telling me is that even the parables aren't literal.
Describe the parables to me.
It's a joke. So parables obviously aren't to be taken literally because Jesus was teaching in metaphor. But anyways,
Yeah,
I
okay.
agree with I agree with the general sentiment that some people get a little too excited about literally taking every word from the Bible. And so I think as long as you use good judgment going into it, you'll be fine because once you knock out all the metaphors and parables and even the questionable accounts like uh creation events and stuff like that, like who was there, it was it was just
Yeah.
God. So and then who listened to God describing the creation event, and so it was probably passed down through generations and maybe a little bit of phone game involved, but I wouldn't worry about that too much. um I do find it interesting that you pretty much are on board with like, I don't know, 70% of Christianity, but not quite, gung ho about the religion itself. Is what I'm hearing.
Well, yeah, and I can get into that, and I suppose it depends on interpretation of what Christianity is. So really, I find it's a fascinating topic, and there's so much that it's hard to delve into. So,
But we only got 45 minets, so we'll have to do the
well,
quick and dirty version.
whenever 1 year old here wakes up behind me, you'll hear it too, and then it'll be
Yeah,
game
yeah.
over. But
Gotcha.
let's take, for example, the version of Christianity that the Ortho boys subscribe to, where
Okay.
they
Ortho
have,
bros. That's the
yeah,
correct term.
Ortho bros, sure, call them whatever you want, where they
Okay.
have to submit to a church authority, where they suspend their thinking, where they do interpret the Bible extremely literally and are bound into that, and then find ways to justify that through logic. That kind of Christianity I reject. And
Okay.
so there seems to be portions of the various denominations that that are acceptable to me. Where we run into trouble is where an organized religion will reject objective truth in order to the closest I can come to quantifying it is that those individuals that worship the human mind, the individual human mind and its conceptions, seem to fall into the trap of evil. So if you look at politics, those political parties that say we create our own reality, or those academics that do so, they seem to suffer terrible consequences in the end. So when churches and church organizations do the same thing in order to justify a political position, in order to maintain power. Let's say you have a
Hmm.
church authority that
Sure.
it's in its best interest to have a certain narrative that maintains their power, then I think you're bound for trouble right away. And I reject that.
Yep. I agree. Step one, we should definitely separate politics from religion, because as soon as you try to combine the two, it always gets messy and it never has good results. So,
So sure. So
I
let me try and do one thing before we step away from that, just to address how I
sure.
feel religion steps into everything. When we talk about the economy and the free market,
Okay.
what the free market is a ability for a variety of ideas to be tested to butt up against the objective reality that I talk about. Those that work will be purchased or will thrive, and those that do not will die unless they're held in place by some sort of an infrastructure with a power, with an intent to hold power. I believe it's the same thing in nature. Good ideas work and thrive, and bad ideas don't. And I think that's a tiny part of how we touch God, touch objective reality. Which ideas are successful, which show themselves to be true in the same way that Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the light. And I'm trying not to be blasphemous. There are some
Hmm.
ideas that are true. And how do we reveal that? How do we test them? The only way is to butt them up against objective reality and see if they fail. If we
Hmm.
don't take that method, if we use our human intellect instead, it seems to fail us in almost every occasion.
Wow. Sounds like you put a lot of thought into this. I was going to go with a way more simple comparison of the only time I feel like um, economics invokes religion is like on the topic of the rule of law. And so whenever I talk to people about like my version of capitalism, the only restrictions I would put on it is like Christian morality, and so that's the only time I kind of invoke religion per se. But even then, it's in pretty vague terms as far as you don't have to be a Christian in order to be a free market capitalist. It's just the best outcome, meaning you don't kill and steal and lie to achieve those market goals. But yeah, you have a way better in depth analysis of it than I had. So kudos.
Well, and if we talk about Christian morality and what those things mean, is it possible that what's being described in Christian morality in the Bible in the Ten Commandments is a very sophisticated, accurate, and true set of guidelines and boundaries for our behavior that will meet some sort of an end goal that we really are incapable of understanding? That's my question. Is there a longer term goal that those behaviors will benefit that we can't conceptualize and that have been passed down through trial and error by the very dint of the fact that they've survived for thousands of years?
Yeah, I would agree with you that there is almost like a I don't want to say scientific way of approaching it, but like a methodology of approaching this process to see which system is the best. And so that's kind of the whole elevator pitch of conservataria is to show that you don't have to be like a religious zealot in order to like subscribe to the general theory I'm proposing. Is that as long as you understand the fundamental ideas, that's really all you need. And then the free market will just like explain for you what systems work and which systems don't work, and again including the moral foundation itself, which I would say you shouldn't ever compromise. But just for shits and giggles, like if you ever wanted to have like the final debate of all time, you could put even Christian morality on the test table to see if there is a better system than Christian morality as far as running like a free market system or a small government. So yeah.
That's right. That's right. I'm not familiar. Like, I have a couple of real weaknesses. I haven't spent enough time in Christian scripture, so I'm not as familiar with it as I would like to be. I'm also not
You
familiar with other.
should.
Well, I should do some more reading. I'm also not as familiar with other belief systems as I would like to be, so
I
that I
can
had a
summarize them if you need to know the skinny version of it.
sure.
I
Do
mean,
you want?
when we have free time, but not right now.
Yeah,
but
sure. So
but
so so basically, I guess the difference, I would say, and some of these things, like even up to now, some of the things that I've said generate a tremendous amount of not just resistance but hatred from some religious people, and I'm not
oh yeah,
exactly sure why. Uh, because
I
I
can make
don't think,
guesses.
yeah, I don't think what I'm saying is too far off of some of the beliefs. I will say one thing: it's possible that the Bible and the Ten Commandments are revelatory, meaning they're
Hmm.
revealing something that was there already. They didn't create, they revealed, and that's magnificent in my opinion. But
I
that
would
may be
say
some.
that.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. I was going to say that and then some. Not only does it reveal the things that were kind of already instinctually known, but even things that weren't quite known yet. So it's a little best of both worlds.
So if we go into kind of the realm of, do we have an instinctual? Because this is what I'm struggling with right now. There are a couple
Hmm.
main questions, basically because of events in my life. Do we have an instinctual knowledge of good and evil, or what's right or wrong? I don't know if there's a difference between the two. And
I
is
think there
evil?
definitely is, and we can definitely address that. If you want to spend 30 minutes talking about that, we can.
Yeah, there's so much. And then the other question that I seem to run up against some disagreement on amongst Christians is evil an active force, or is it simply a lack of good? Is there some consciousness and intelligence acting to sabotage and cause damage, or is it just when good is not there that this takes place?
It's both. You can commit evil through omission or commission, and so if you understand those words, then that's what it means.
I do understand them. Yes, I've
Sweet.
seen.
So
Go ahead.
neglect and the cold-blooded intent are both possible, precursors to sin. So
Okay. Yeah. So if we look at sort of what's going on and some of the things that, like I say, have happened to me, but in society at large, it seems as though, which is what brings me back to objective truth, objective reality. It seems as though most things that turn out to be evil work against objective truth, and sometimes people even know it and will continue to do so. Liars or political movements that conceal the truth, those seem to be the ones that turn out to be evil and do the most damage. And I'm not sure whether it seems to be some sort of a focused. To me, this evil that I speak of, and now we're in woo-woo territory, seems to be too smart and too focused and effective to be just random. If I look at some of the things that are going on in the school system, where I've seen certain things happening, man, it's
hmm
sophisticated undermining of things like the family, sophisticated undermining of things like Christianity and religion, community.
hmm
It's very sophisticated and focused, and I can't bring myself to believe that it's just a random event.
Oh, the devil's been busy, and not only does he spend a lot of time with the ultra clever, sneaky ways of doing things, he also uses the tools of like just laziness and ignorance and stuff like that. So that's why I think it's good to remember both situations, because sometimes humans try to gloss over the manslaughter type sins because they feel like oh, we're all dumb, we make mistakes, that shouldn't be considered evil. It's only when you plan to murder someone is then that it's evil or something like that. And so unfortunately, like I said, as far as accountability, um, that's what it ultimately boils down to, which again goes back to whether or not things are good or evil, whether or not you intended for them to be evil or not isn't the deciding factor. Even though it may be an important variable, it's not. It won't make or break the process. So
Okay, so could I dive into that statement you just made, because I think
sure,
it makes a lot of sense, and I'll tell you why. So what now, you tell me if anything that any of your thoughts I interpret, if I'm interpreting them wrong. But what I'm saying is, what I'm hearing you say is, your own personal intent may not be the only way that you assess whether an action is evil or not. There's something greater
correct.
than you. Okay, so this is the cleaving point between, in my opinion, once again back to politics, the political left and the
Mm-hmm.
political right. So, in terms of the left, they generally say what your intent is what's important, not what the consequences of your action. They will also generally say that objective reality outside yourself does not exist. You create your own reality. And in this way, I believe they worship the individual human intellect as an individual, and they miss out on the larger picture, this larger objective reality that contains God, that I believe in. And I think that does a tremendous amount of damage in their policy making, in their
Mm-hmm.
ways that they set up education programs, in the ways all sorts of stuff. So I can even hear it in your language that you believe in a larger world outside of yourself that is more important than your own individual thoughts and beliefs. Is that correct?
Well, you gotta be careful when you phrase it more important because as I just pointed out, even though it's an additional variable, it may not necessarily be the most important variable. And so, we can
Is there something bigger than yourself out there that you should submit to?
definitely. I mean, the
Yeah, so
bigger
that would
force is God. You know, that's the thing that's not you that you should submit to. But it's not just God and you. It's also others and nature and other parts of reality. So we have a lot of things we have to deal with.
I agree. Yes. So thanks for clarifying that, because the second way
Hmm.
I worded that was probably more accurate. Like, if you go back to say, take the statement that you made and apply it to something like abortion, for example.
Hmm.
I don't know
Okay.
where you stand on that, but I can probably take a guess.
Completely against
So
any case.
so now there is a certain political viewpoint that says the mother is what matters. It's her choice.
Nope.
There's a different viewpoint that says there's a larger picture here. There's another individual possibly involved.
Hmm.
There's other consequences involved that we could not be considering. There's a larger picture. So, do you see how it starts to drill down into the two basic worldviews that are combating one another right now? Even on
I, I could
issues.
definitely I could definitely see how humans will do mental gymnastics to try to get away from the actual debate because the debate is about whether or not it's okay to murder babies. And so the first step they try to do is turn them into parasites so they're not actually human babies. And then the second step they try to do is bring politics into it to make it sound like it has something to do with women's being oppressed and women's rights and women's bodies and their choices and so on and so forth. And so you see that, every single level of the discussion, they try to blur the actual topic. Again, the core topic is it good or evil to murder babies? Yes or no? And so, since they already know the answer to that question, that's why they spend all their time and energy trying to obfuscate the discussion by including all the other variables that sound like they're important, but actually aren't. And that's a good example of how to get off the topic really fast.
Well, and I think that it's an important question because it delves into the core of the worldview of. It seems to me people are quite simple in the end, and if you know a few of their core beliefs, then you can
Hmm.
probably predict a lot of what they're going to say. And a
Yep.
lot of the people that make these decisions believe the rights of the individual are the most important thing that need to be considered. Them, not a larger picture, not others. And it's in that larger picture and others that I believe God lies. So it's my belief that the
Hmm.
people that say that they themselves are the most, they create their own reality, they're the most important thing in terms of their own orbit. Those people are in fact rejecting God and make poor decisions because of it. That's my belief.
I'm amused when the point you just brought up, that a lot of them try to emphasize the point about individual rights and stuff like that, overriding, some sort of, old fashioned morality feelings or whatever and stuff like that. And yet these are the same people that don't care one jot or tittle about the rights of the human baby they're getting ready to murder. And so it's funny how, in one breath they'll say they believe, this very important principle, and then in the same breath they will completely deny it. So that's why I'm not interested in playing those word games with people.
Well, and the thing is, there are major contradictions in their own worldview, which, in my opinion,
Yep.
makes it not true. And in my opinion, then I don't believe it's very connected with what I would consider God. I'll give you an example. Most of the people that will make a decision on pro-life or pro-choice who fall on the and if you delve into their worldview, you almost find this. It's amazing how common it is. Most of the
Hmm.
people that will talk about coming from a pro-choice position will say it's all about consent. I didn't consent to have this child inside me, or I don't
Hmm.
consent. And some of them are now advocating to saying I can make that decision even if the child's breastfeeding. I don't consent to
Yeah.
breastfeeding, so it's become ridiculous. But those same people, oftentimes when you get into a deep enough philosophical discussion, will also say that there's no such thing as free will, so consent doesn't exist.
Exactly.
So it's a massive cleavage, and it shows in the end a misunderstanding and a departure from the truth in their own worldview. And like I you should try it. Walk up to an individual and ask them if they believe in objective truth or they believe they create their own reality. From that answer, you will be able to go into a debate for them. You'll be able to tell what party they vote for. You'll be able to tell where they stand on gun control, abortion,
Hmm.
where they stand on taxes, the economy, all the rest of that from that one question. It's actually quite stunning how accurate I've found it to be.
Yep. People always accuse me of like oversimplifying people and putting them in boxes and stuff, but I think to your point, there is a neat little pattern in nature that you can observe with humans. That once you establish their core axioms and their belief system, it kind of lays out everything other decision they're going to make about any political topic or religious view or whatever. And so, um, I'm still working on it, but I'm starting to hone it down to a nice little clump of ideas and stuff. But it's mostly politics for now. But I can probably do the same thing with religion. I can probably easily categorize most humans into like at least two major categories, if not maybe like a kind of a third gray area that some kind of hit parts of the stuff on. But yeah, I agree with everything you just said.
So, now what purpose do you think that predilection, that idiosyncrasy of humanity would serve? Why would we be like that? There must be a reason that a lot of us are like that.
Free will. So getting back to your problem with the variables and which one's the most important, I was just about to bring up the good old debate about nature versus nurture and why they never bring up free will and stuff like that. And so this is where you have to be prepared for these discussions, because again, if you enter into your the worldview with just like everything is just either chemical reactions or energy or whatever, and so there's no room for like abstraction or ideas, or definitely not free will, but but not even really mind, because mind doesn't really exist to physicalists. And so at least like the dualists understand that there is a non-physical realm to the mind, and even though they don't attribute it to religion or spirits or ghosts or anything, they can at least conceive of the idea that it's a little more complicated than just plain old biology and science. And so so again, the answer being, even though free will is the most important variable in this particular example, there's also important variables to be accounted for in the nurture, the way you were raised and bringed up, the peer pressure you experience, all that sort of stuff, and even a slight tinge of nature. So again, going back to our biology, are all humans programmed a certain way? More than likely. Um, does that mean that because you're a serial killer, it's not your fault? Your chemicals made you do it? No. And so, maybe certain humans are slightly more predisposed to like giving in to their anger, for example. But that doesn't excuse, the nurture and the free will elements, which they will do. And they'll try to argue that even in court and say that this person had a chemical imbalance in their brain, therefore they're not guilty, and that sort of thing. And so that's why I don't like where those conversations go. But anyways, it depends on
Hey, I
your
think
other
I
view.
think that Cynthia's down in the chat. I don't know whether she wants to come up. And
Yeah, I said hi to her. She definitely doesn't want to talk about religion, because we were talking in chat earlier and she was reminding me how much she regretted being on the last stream with uh, Richard and me and Bo talking about religion, because she felt very attacked and didn't want to talk about. By the way, that could be another topic we can bring up some other time. We're already at 30 minutes. I don't know how much longer I got you, but I'll
oh,
go
we
ahead
got.
and drop.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Sorry.
I was about to say, I'll just tell you the other topics I have in mind that we can discuss if and when you have time.
Sure.
Um, one thing being magic, and then the other thing um, being the divide between like agnostics and spiritual and religious people, and see if we can figure out why those things don't always mesh too well.
Yeah, that would be extremely interesting. Both of those things. So when you're talking about magic, are you talking about illusionists or whether magic actually exists for real?
I'm talking about the difference between miracles and divine providence, which is a very, very religious topic, which you may not be familiar with the second term. You're probably familiar with the first term. So the problem with this topic is it gets so like, pulling your hair out, and just painful. It's painful stuff, pulling teeth kind of process. But anyways, so the reason why I started off with magic is because non-religious people are vaguely aware of the concept of magic, and so most people dismiss it as optical illusions and sleight of hand type processes. But then they'll file certain things under a different category, like unexplained phenomena. And so the most atheist physicalist people will say that maybe there's science we can't explain yet, and so it appears to some people to be magic or whatever. But then they still get stuck on even easy obvious examples, like again, what's the difference between mind and matter and stuff like that. And um so magic is not a fun topic, because it causes so much, people getting stuck in ruts. Even religious people, like two religious people talking to each other, can't agree on what those terms mean, because first of all, even all humans can't agree on what miracles are. And then finally, the final boss is divine providence, which is a fun little phrase we came up with a long time ago to finally in the debate about whether or not modern miracles still happen, and whether or not we can observe them, test them, prove them, whatever. And so I just wanted you to be aware of that topic, because we'll save that for like when you've got like 2 or 3 hours to kill, because it's going to take a long time to get through that one.
No, that sounds fascinating, iphi. And when you're talking about subjects like that, I think that
Mm-hmm.
a person has to come at it with a little bit of, I don't know if humility is the right word, but
Oh
sometimes
yeah.
people become
Oh, you broke up. They come
which they
attached.
attached, yeah, which they don't like to, like, let's say, for example, we're talking about magic and miracles. If we can
Uh-huh.
allow for a little speculation in a conversation, or allow your interlocutor to make a few errors and not jump all over them, then
Mm-hmm.
then the discussion becomes more fun, because we can talk about, well, I had this thing happen, or leave the possibility
Yeah.
open for that. And so
Uh-huh.
no, I think those discussions, but they're also, they become painful if the culture of the discussion is any small error that you see, you jump on, or, oh, well, where's your proof of that, or show me your evidence when you're talking about miracles, stuff like that, then I think
Well, that's the give and take. It's a double-edged sword because on one hand, as a religious person, I believe miracles are real. Like I don't deny that miracles have happened on Earth within human history. The problem is certainly in the modern context. We're talking about a whole different system, and so this is where a lot of humans just gloss over the difference and just think it's all the same. Nothing has changed. And so it gets complicated and messy and sticky because a lot of people have very strong feelings about the topic, and they don't want to hear your logic and reason about stuff. They know what feels right, or they know what happened to them and it's very real to them, and you can't deny their reality, and those types of
yeah.
conversations.
And
And
so I think,
so
yeah,
yeah.
so I think the way I would approach it is when we're talking about God or miracles, I've always felt that our minds are quite immature, not in terms of that kind of content. And so if I'm talking to, say, a 10-year-old about something like marriage or divorce, I'm going to be quite soft, quite tolerant. I'm not going to drill into the mistakes or the flaws into their logic in order to move the discussion towards an end where we both feel like we accomplished something, or it was productive. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's
I
fascinating. Can you kind of take me through divine providence, your understanding of it, the Cole's Notes version?
Yeah, I'll give you the skinny version as soon as I summarize my other topic real quick. Because, like I said, we got a whole another. The next time we talk, save me another 4 hours for this topic. So, my other topic is going to be the problem with crossing the divide between spiritual people but not religious people. And so, what I mean by that is you'll encounter a lot in life, these people who will tell you all about the good feelings they have about their religion, about how they love God and God loves them, and God talks to them every day, and does miracles for them every day. And then when you start asking questions to them, they get very defensive and angry. They're like, how
Uh,
dare you question my religion and my faith and my beliefs and stuff like that. And so the funny part is this doesn't only happen between like atheists and believers. It also happens between Christians and Christians. And so I always found it interesting that, like, sometimes you're in the room with Christians and Christians, and then one Christian asks the other Christian, what do you mean by you saw a miracle the other day? Can you describe it to me? And then they talk about, they survived a car crash, or they found a penny on the road, and that penny bought a piece of candy for a nun or something like that. And so they don't want to engage the actual details of their claims. And so I have filed these people under the category called spiritual but not religious, meaning they love talking about the feel good parts of religion, but they don't actually want to tell you what their religious beliefs are, or why they came to those conclusions, or how to defend them or explain them, or anything like that. So that's the whole another 4 hour talk
let
talk
me
at
throw
another time.
let me throw a question. This is a groping question by me. You tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Sure.
But it seems as if those people that you're describing may be considering God and religion once again from their own individual perspective. It just seems to me like the way you paraphrased their thoughts, that they weren't considering miracles or God or spirituality globally. It was more how it related to them.
Kind of, but it's more about just remaining vague. So as long as you allow them to use language that just sounds very nondescript, it's just like God, and they may not even claim the Christian God. They'll just say God did XYZ, and then you're like, which God? And they go like, how dare you question my religion, and stuff like that. But not only that, but again, even Christians will engage in this behavior where you say, okay, God did a miracle for you, and you say, okay, tell me about this miracle, and then they're, how dare you question my religion, and blah 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 blah. And so
Does it seem inauthentic to you?
no, I think they're genuinely limited to that sort of understanding of religion. And so um and this kind of gets back into like the general mentality of human beings. And so, generally speaking, you'll notice that certain key terms are always associated with these groups. And so, whenever you're talking to a spiritual but not religious person, you'll almost always hear them complain about organized religion, is one of the key phrases they always use. And so I I always sound like I'm trolling them or, just being mean or whatever, but whenever they bring that up, my first question to them is, so you would prefer disorganized religion? Like, I don't understand your complaint against organized religion. And of course, I kind of know what they mean, and I'm, just, pecking at them a little bit, but what they probably mean is like institutionalized religion, and more importantly, the political overlap of a lot of religions and stuff like that. And so that's fine if that's what they mean, but I wish people would be, a little more precise in their language when they bring up these topics and stuff. But getting back to the general point is that, again, these people are spiritual but not religious, because they are more than happy to tell you that they accepted Jesus as their personal Lord and Savior. But then when you ask them, how did that happen? Like, what is the process that is involved in order to accept Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior? Then they don't want to give you that answer. They're like, oh, no, 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 don't ask me those questions. That's too much detail, and you're prying too much, and blah, blah, blah. And so, anyways, I think you get kind of the gist of where I'm going with this whole big cloud of discussion. But like, I'm sorry I derailed your first question about divine providence, which we can go back to. But like I said, two big topics I want to address at some point. Definitely not today. I think I got for about another 10 minutes. But anyways,
yeah, and
so
hey, no problem on taking the discussion anywhere you want to go. That's no problem at all. If there's
yep.
a path that the discussion veers off into, perfect.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
But I
it's
also don't
important
want to
and broad.
I don't want to derail too much. I just brought those two topics up because those are the two main topics I want to talk about very soon. But anyways, whenever you have chunks of hours at time, we'll address that.
Well,
Real quick,
go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to answer your question real quick. The really short version of divine providence is basically the claim that God is working in your life somehow that doesn't necessarily cross the miracle line. And so it's physically possible that God is doing little subtle behind the scenes things in your life, meanwhile using the laws of nature to affect these things. And so, like, he may send rain on your garden to make sure your crops grow, which doesn't violate the natural laws of the physical universe, and therefore is not a miracle, even though it kind of sounds like a miracle because God caused that rain cloud to happen. And so we would file that under divine providence. The problem with divine providence is there is absolutely zero way to prove that claim is true, because you may say, I feel like, God sent me that rain cloud, but to the other atheist in the room who's equally observing the exact same phenomenon, he may say, well, I feel like, God had nothing to do with it. That's just physics. And that's how, when the sun heats up the water, it turns into vapor and then it forms a cloud, then it rains on the earth. And that's all science. So there's no need to invoke God in this discussion. And so the reason why divine providence came up, by the way, is because in modern times, we have to constantly argue with fellow Christians about whether or not miracles are happening right now as we speak.
Okay. So would it be a given that divine providence would always be working towards good in your life?
Maybe, not necessarily. That's there's
Like,
divine providence is.
If you said in the long term, if we took because it's always ambiguous and we might not even know what good is, but could we agree that God is a force for good?
That's the general assumption, yes.
Okay,
Also, divine providence may also include nefarious agents as well, not just God and holy good actions, but the devil and evil actions.
Yeah, that's what I was curious about. So when we say divine providence, we're not necessarily saying this is just God. It could be another force also operating with divine providence as well? I just didn't want to get the terminology wrong.
It's like 99% of the time assumed you're talking about God and blessings. So, you know, that's the general assumption whenever that phrase is invoked.
And
But
I would make these concessions in a discussion about that. I would say, okay, let's say if it's divine providence that God has a hand in or is consciously doing, then we can say that is a force for good. We can leave good or bad and what that means for later. But
yeah.
when it's God, then we're going to say it's good. If it's not
Mhm.
God, then we would say it's bad, just for the purposes of the discussion.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
That
And the silliness of this whole debate and this whole discussion is once you hear all the explanations of what divine providence is, you're like, why do humans even talk about this? This is complete nonsense, because it's like, first of all, it's, as I stated earlier, it's impossible to verify these claims. There's no way to know that you are correct when you claim this thing was a divine providence event. And so that's why I gave you the example of the rain on my garden. Now,
Now,
I could say,
where do you stand on divine providence? Do you believe it happens?
I think it's possibly happening, but I don't know and I don't care. So it's like
Yeah.
one of those things where I don't feel like it's worth the time and energy to argue with people about this thing, because it's such a I don't even know I don't know what the correct word for it is. Red herring, non sequitur. I don't know what the proper term is, but it's just such a complete, useless top. It's like the most useless thing to argue in life ever. But the reason why it was invoked into our modern discussions again is because there are so many self-proclaimed Christians walking around right now as we speak, claiming miraculous events are happening. So now we have to properly define a miracle. And I think you can probably guess what that is. Do you know what a miracle is?
So a miracle would be something that, in my estimation, would violate our known laws of physics or laws of nature or whatever logic we're operating by.
Correct. And again, 99% of the time, we're going to assume it's God doing good things, like he's walking on water to teach man about the gospel and blah, blah, blah. Or he's raising your grandmother back from the dead again to teach you about the gospel and about God's word and salvation, etc. But that doesn't limit it to that, because again, there may be other supernatural actors involved, whether they're angels or demons or the devil. It doesn't matter. There's other. God's not the only spirit that we're aware of. And so it is physically possible that not only are devils and angels also mucking about, with miracles and stuff like that. That, again, we don't know. All we can do is observe the miracle and say, "Holy shit, something magical just happened." Now, who did it and why are the first questions you should always ask.
Hey,
The second
iphi,
you
I
observe
got to
that.
go in a couple minutes. I want to say one
Yep.
thing about a point that you just made about 3 or 4 minutes ago. So you just
Okay.
said that the discussion around miracles or divine providence or miracles, I forget
Mm-hmm.
which, it seems to me that your position was that it consumes intellectual energy that could better be spent elsewhere. The discussion itself may not be
Yes.
that productive. Is that correct?
Hopefully, I will convince you of that when we talk about it. But you are
I'm
100%
not
correct.
disagreeing. I want to give you an example of and bring it back to these forces that are working for the truth
Uh-huh.
and that are so I believe it was in the 60s or 70s. There was a Russian mathematician, and I will find the specifics. In order to disrupt Western universities and absorb as much time as possible, this person devised an equation or a mathematical problem that was known to be unsolvable, but was also tantalizing enough that mathematicians are still working on it because it seems like a solution is always at the edge of their abilities, and it's
Yep.
absorbed thousands of man hours of very valuable intellectual man hours not in order to achieve a solution, but in order to disrupt the search for truth. Now, it's possible that some people who engage in this conversation with you around, divine intervention or miracles, have at their goal not the truth, but just the sole purpose of disrupting the search for truth. Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, I'm fully aware of that as well, and that's always something you have to take into account whenever you engage people in these discussions. But again, I'm going to go ahead and give many of them the benefit of the doubt and say again that many people actually do believe they're witnessing miracles. So in their heart, they actually believe a miracle really happened,
Do you
and
think
so.
iphi there's any chance that some of them become so identified with this concept of a miracle? Like, I've given you this example before, but I'll do it again. I worked
Mhm,
at a factory one time, and we used to go out drinking afterwards in the pub. And one night in
mhm,
the pub, there were two mechanics, a Chevy mechanic and a Ford mechanic. And they wound up arguing with one another as to which brand was better. In the end, they had a
mhm.
big fist fight over it. And the Ford mechanic was standing on the top of a table. I'll never forget this. And he was screaming out, "I am Ford. I am Ford." He had literally identified with this brand. And
I
I'm
am the
wondering if,
science.
yes, I'm wondering if these people that believe in these miracles are so bought into or identify it with it so heavily that they will do things to disrupt conversations inauthentically. I believe you pointed to a disingenuity already, like an inauthenticity about the way these people talk. And it seems
Mhm.
like even babies, I've seen studies where even babies looking at adults' faces can tell if they're being authentic or not, and they tend to
Right.
turn away. So I wonder
Mhm.
if there's something intrinsic in ourselves that senses phoniness in a conversation that's very tough for us to describe, but that we find annoying nonetheless, and it turns us off.
That's quite possible, and so that's the problem in modern times is um, there are a lot of people that are so lost and confused that they actually don't know that that they're caught up in this trap. And so in the old days it was easier to identify people that are just trolling for the lulz and stuff, or just so brainwashed by their kool-aid that they can't even listen to logic or reason anymore. They don't care, and they are the science. And
Yeah.
so
Well,
that I
let me
go ahead.
throw one last thing before I leave. Sorry to interrupt you because I know I got to go.
Nope.
What if these people iphi that are behaving in this way that is inauthentic? This is not me saying this. This is a theory. What if
Hmm.
they're being guided by one of these forces that is not good? They're being somehow influenced to behave
Yeah,
in a way that's beyond their own individual abilities, but works for evil anyways.
it's quite possible they're just agents of the devil. But
Or
again,
in
I
part,
always,
like not just evil, but in part their behavior is influenced by evil. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah, oh, definitely. I think they kind of go hand in hand. Personally, I mean, again, I see a lot of I connect the dots a lot of times, maybe sometimes even when they don't need to be. Like I said earlier, even with politics, I can connect lots of dots and show you like why these groups of people always produce the same outcomes and stuff like that. And so and sure, who what's the cause behind it? Is it just human stupidity and greed, or is it the devil and his cleverness and his ability to manipulate people and all that good stuff? And so um that's a fun question to ask. But again, I always just kind of grant people that they're just humans, and they have their own inherent flaws and stuff. And so um, whatever it may be, we'll figure it out eventually. But those are two fun topics that we can get way deep into next time when you have some hours to kill. So,
Well, iphi, thank you very much, sir, for inviting me up on your panel. It was a
yeah.
fascinating discussion.
All right. Anytime.
Okay.
Thanks for stopping by and listen to me ramble for a while.
No problem at all. Talk to you later.
All right. Have a
Bye.
good one.
You
Tell
too.
the kid I said hi. Okay, Giddies. Well, since no one else wants to jump up, I'll go ahead and kill the stream here. But there's a couple of topics I would like to address with anyone who's interested. Again, the topics of spiritual versus religious people and why there's a difference and why they can't get along very well. And then the topic of miracles versus divine providence, which is such a fun topic that, we kind of gave little appetizers and spoilers for, but anyone who's interested in those topics, those are currently the main thing I was planning on discussing soon. Otherwise, if you have your own idea, your own topic, holler at me and we'll go from there. Thanks for stopping by, everybody. Catch you on the next one.